welcome back to my studying, my fellow fans of the written word. Back to Wheel of Time, back to, well, not back to, reading the Fires of Heaven for the first time. And as always, let's do a quick recap, shall we? I've read chapters 1 to 5, plus prologue, so let's quickly get over them. So we have a prologue, and we have a scene of Elida. She is having some troubles with her newly, well, not newly usurped, she usurped the Emerald seat position, and she is having some troubles with her advisors. She is somewhat in a position of having established herself as a leader but not being able to hold that position all that well, and that's very well displayed with the idea of, do we mention the former Emerlin or not? The idea of Rand being around and being the actual Dragon Reborn. And we also have Ordith, or Padan Fain of course, acting as her counselor. That guy, career, right? From a peddler to a possessed agent of evil that advised like half of the leaders of most important factions in the world. Just great success. And he also has an eye on the Shadow Logoth dagger, which he also, well, he talks about retrieving it. He doesn't steal it yet, but I do think he will. And then we have a scene of Raven, and Raven is the Lord Gabriel that has seduced the Queen Margaise, and him, Lanfear, Samael, and Grendel have sort of a communion, a forum, a conversation in which they discuss about Asmodean's betrayal and how powerful is Rand, and just try to make a plan to get him. Back at Siwan land, or rather Min land, so we had another group of people, Siwan, Lian, and Min, and we find out that they have been arrested. They've been arrested by a lord named Garrett Bryn, because there was an incident with the barn. They were on the road, they wanted to find shelter in the barn, and they were found out, so Logain kind of clumsily knocked out some candles and the barn burned out and he escaped, but 3 of them were arrested. And Liane practices her, I guess, seduction skills, and they are of course presenting themselves under different names, and they also give this fealty to him, some sort of a, not some sort of, a very strong oath to serve him, but they escape all the same when Logain rescues them, because he still wants his revenge, and he cannot get his revenge if Siwan is there working off in the field or in the manor for who knows how long. Then we have another scene, but this one is in the royal palace in Camelin, where Lady Altima, she is a character that was sort of scheming against Rand in Tyr, and he sent her away and humiliated her, so she's also looking to get revenge on him, and She arrives at the royal palace seeking an audience with Queen Margase, and she has heard of rumors about Queen Margase, because Queen Margase for ages had this aura of being this very capable stateswoman, not prone to emotional outbursts. But now with her new lover, she's a completely different person. And well, she gets an audience and sees her suspicions confirmed. She sees that Margase is completely smitten by this man. This man turns out to be Ravin in disguise, the Forsaken, one of the Forsaken, and he also sees through the woman through the Ultima. So she has this very poignant moment where the manipulator was stripped bare, so to say, by the Forsaken. Back to Rhuidean. Rhuidean is now no longer forbidden, no longer sealed. It is a city that is slowly getting repopulated, and he is living under the roof of maidens, and he's having arguments with Moiraine, and Moiraine is kind of leading in charge on uncovering all these artifacts. And she shows him one of the seals, and a lot of Terangriels and Angriels they are uncovering. And in the process of them just having fights, he starts to experience Lewis Terrance's memories. Like all of a sudden he hears Lewis Terrance comments about Lewis Terrance's deceased wife, Ileana, and he thinks he's losing it. But Matt also has a fun moment where he is not that he is flirting with a spear sister. A spear sister is flirting with him, and well, he hooks up with her, and then we have some sort of drama with Avienda again, telling Ran how much she hates him, and it doesn't help that a lot of spear sisters are trying to sink into Ran's bed. And yeah, just a lot of drama in that department. And Rand is has revealed a sort of a general plan to Moiraine, in which he wants to gather the Aiel that are left under his command and lead them and conquer to conquer the rest of the world. Also, he's super angry with Asmodean because, surprise surprise, he's a terrible teacher, and the sort of whole operation of Asmodean is too weak to truly demonstrate the things he needs to show, because he has been cut off. But at the same time, it is what it is. Nobody knows who he is. He is under the guise of being an official gleeman to the Lord Dragon, and that's it. And Egwene has trips to the Dreamland again, which is... Oh, back to my favorite section of these videos, which is questions.
5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
This is sort of a question that maybe isn't all that important in the general meaning of it, but am I misremembering something? Because in the previous book it was described that Rand has these marks that are tattoos that mark him as Chief of Chiefs. But there is a line here in chapter 2, I think, and it explicitly says that they are not tattoos, but part of his skin. Was this a retcon, or was it just differently worded? I just took it as just being tattoos and not this organic thing that kind of is now one with his hands. Another question. So Gabriel or Raven, he is using some sort of compulsion on people around him, namely on women around him, and most importantly the Queen Morghese. My question is his compulsion skill any different from Leandrin's or other Black Hodges? Or is it just same power, just more potent, no pun intended, just like a slightly leveled up or more leveled up version of that? Another question is, so this is a not specifically question about plot or mechanics, just about writing. I'm curious about Jordan's approach to writing prologues. So we had 3 books with prologues that started very cryptic but foreshadowed a lot, especially in Eye of the World. Now, each book from 1 to 3 was less and less vague as it went on. Then we had book 4 and it abandoned the prologue altogether. Was this because the book was already very long, the largest up that point? Because we're back to book 5, The Fires of Heaven, and once again we have a prologue. But this prologue doesn't read like a prologue at all to me. It just reads like a normal chapter. And I wouldn't say that there is much foreshadowing in it. It's just very explicit, very straightforward. Doesn't feel like a prologue. But more about that later. Another question, and this is like a spoilerific question, I realize. Is Asmodean truly on Rand's side? And I'm kind of have my doubts if he is, but I'm more interested in his skills as a teacher, which we know are bad. But will he end up teaching Rand anything useful, anything that will down the line pay off and truly repay itself? I also have a power level question. So we know that Asmodean is kind of cut off and weak. But if he weren't weak, I could see Nynaeve taking him on. Could Moraine defeat Asmodean in his former state? Also, could Egwene defeat Asmodean in any form? Could she defeat him now that he is not bound but cut off from the source? He cannot channel very well, probably. Because I see Egwene's skills more of a, not a offense way, just in a utility way. She is a dream walker. She has just, well, she is naturally curious and all that. She seeks knowledge. It is interesting to me. But let's move on. I also have another power level question, but it's also more of a, did I miss it? Or is it different wording type of question? There is a line that Rand says, well, internal monologue, the more you, or was it Egwene? I think it was Egwene. So essentially, to paraphrase it, it was, the more you draw on power, the more you want, until you destroy or still yourself. Now, this is the first time I noticed this. So Rand does describe multiple times where he draws power to the point where he almost bursts, overloads himself. I get that. But this is the first time I'm seeing that you could actually still yourself. Which is... I thought that stilling was kind of the opposite, cutting off someone from the source, like someone else does it to you. How would you do it to yourself? Would it be like a lamp just bursting and no longer being able to project light? Something along those lines. And my last question, and this is a tongue-in-cheek thing, but even before reading Wheel of Time as a series, lurking around forums that are dedicated to fantasy books, and especially on Reddit, people always joke about Wheel of Time and braid tugging and sniffing and skirts being smoothed, but the bosom levels are just hitting critical mass in this book. So many bosoms. Robert Jordan really likes bosoms, which is no great offense or crime, but I find it more memeable than braid tugging, because only one person tugs her braids, Nynaeve, and the bosoms, they are ever present. So let's move on to what I liked. Elida. I did not expect Elida to acknowledge that Rand is Dragon Reborn. So that tells me that she's not stupid. It adds a dimension of nuance to her. She's just not wise. She's power hungry, she's vain, she's incredibly evil and cruel. In many ways, I can see her being the type of villain that's more effective than a lot of, well, dark friends. Because we all know a person like that. There's more to her. She's not only incredibly short-sighted, she's also incapable of realizing that she's a bad leader, so she lashes out. She doesn't know how truly incapable, unprepared, badly suited for the role she once is. It just makes for a spectacular cocktail, and I will be there with popcorn when it all blows out in her face. I'm sure it will happen. It's the reason why people, well, characters like Dolores Umbridge will always be more memorable than the evil Dark Overlords, because Dark Overlords are abstract and they're more symbolic more than anything, but a person in power that abuses her power, that doesn't care about people she's responsible for and only seeks more power, that's very relatable, sadly. That's very real. And another thing I liked is Logain. We didn't get much of him. I hope we do get some. But I always enjoyed the fact that Jordan doesn't discard his side characters. He tends to have side characters. They're a minor part of a side plot or the main plot, but they're not just forgotten. And it also doesn't feel like he just remembers, oh, I have a character that was left there, maybe I can do something with him. It always feels like it has a purpose. He does things with characters when he plucks them and gives them a more prominent role. It always feels intentional, which is good. And now let's move to things I didn't like. And I think there's just one point I would like to say, and this is the prologue. It wasn't bad. I just, well, it really shouldn't have been prologue. It's a chapter with similar amount of exposition as everything else, maybe slightly more exposition, but and I do understand that in a grander scheme of things, it's a meaningless criticism or complaint. But from an editing standpoint, it really makes no sense for it to be a prologue. It's huge, and not that prologues have to be short, but I think this was too explicit. It makes for a clumsy prologue. Prologue should be providing not exposition but foreshadowing or just setting the stage, and I don't think we needed that because, well, pretty much everyone was where they were at the beginning and at the end of the previous books, and the stage was already set. There were no major changes. I understand if at the end of the last book Rand left the Wastes, for example, and now we had to set the stage for his change of scenery or something, or the villains were congregating on some grand plan. They were just exchanging notes. So yeah, I shouldn't dwell too much on it. Let's move on to predictions.
Well, it's only a guess, but it's all I have to go on.
Well, my prediction about Asmodean. If he doesn't betray Rand, outright betray Rand, something tells me that he's not going to live long. Because just on a practical level, he has a increasingly short list of allies. So Forsaken won his head for betraying them. Moraine or Egwene would just off him the second they find out who he is, or anyone else for that matter. Also Rand could also easily off him. He's not very patient with him for a good reason. And we also have Ordith. If Ordith ever sees him or recognizes him from a distance, he would also want him dead. So yeah, not really. Other prediction is Elida. Elida will piss off her allies one by one. This will happen. And I'm sure her downfall will take a while. I have a feeling that it won't happen at the end of this book. But I do think that her station will be kind of challenged. And I just want to see the consequences for the people living in Tar Valon, because if other sisters are getting mistreated, I'm sure she's also being a bad governor or whatever she is, because it is adamant to me that Tar Valon, the White Tower, the Aes Sedai, they're not only governing themselves, but also the people that live in the town around them. So I'm sure they are not having a great time as well. One obvious thing, everything leads to Rand hooking up with Aviendha. That much is obvious. Will it end up as his fling with Elaine? I don't know. Maybe, probably, who knows, but it will happen. And since Min saw something in Loghain's future, she had a vision about him. She saw glory that's in his future. So maybe, and this is a reach, maybe he'll lead an army against Mazrim Taine, the false dragon that got kidnapped or escaped, because that is a plotline that needs to be resolved. And one other thing that I forgot to mention, this is just enough small thing, but I just now realized that Asmodean says that since he's cut off from the Dark Lord, he is no longer protected from madness. And I feel really, really stupid right now, because this is a question I should have asked. Because, well, how could have all these male channelers Forsaken be for so long? It just doesn't make any sense. And it makes all the sense in the world, actually. It's super interesting. Yeah. So that was it. More to come very soon. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.